The old stone building loomed before me, shrouded in an ethereal mist. It stood like a sentinel from another time, its weathered stones whispering secrets of ages long past. The mist clung to its walls, giving it an almost ghostly appearance, as if it were a mirage that could vanish at any moment. Backpack heavy, I trudged towards the entrance. Each step felt like a journey in itself, the weight of my pack pressing down on my shoulders, a constant reminder of the miles I had traveled. The path was uneven, stones jutting out like the bones of the earth, making my progress slow and laborious. The Wayfarer's Rest, the sign creaked, its paint peeling like sunburnt skin. It swayed gently in the breeze, the creaking sound adding to the eerie atmosphere. The letters, though faded, still held a certain dignity, as if they had seen countless travelers pass through these doors. A wave of exhaustion washed over me. My legs felt like lead and my eyes burned from lack of sleep. I could feel the grime of the road on my skin, a layer of dust and sweat that seemed to cling to me like a second skin. All I wanted was a place to rest, to lay down my burdens, if only for a night. I needed rest, despite the prickling sensation at the back of my neck. It was as if unseen eyes were watching me, judging my every move. The feeling was unsettling, but the promise of a bed, no matter how humble, was too tempting to resist. Stepping inside, a blast of warm air enveloped me, thick with the scent of dust and something faintly sweet, like overripe fruit. The air was heavy, almost oppressive, and it felt as though the room itself was alive, breathing in tandem with me. The dim light cast long shadows, making the room seem larger and more mysterious. The common room was deserted, illuminated by a single flickering bulb that cast long, dancing shadows. The furniture was old and worn, each piece telling a story of countless travelers who had sought refuge here. The silence was almost tangible, broken only by the occasional creak of the building settling. A fire crackled in the hearth, the flames licking at the logs like hungry tongues. The warmth was inviting, a stark contrast to the chill outside. The firelight danced on the walls, creating a mesmerizing display that was both comforting and unsettling. Behind a heavy wooden counter, a figure stirred. The movement was slow, almost deliberate, as if the person was emerging from a long slumber. The counter itself was scarred and pitted, bearing the marks of years of use. "Just me tonight, love," the caretaker croaked, his voice raspy as if unused for days. His words hung in the air, adding to the sense of isolation. He was an old man, his face lined with deep wrinkles that spoke of a hard life. His eyes, though tired, held a spark of curiosity. His eyes, two dark pools in a sea of wrinkles, studied me with unsettling intensity. It was as if he could see right through me, reading my thoughts and fears. The scrutiny made me uncomfortable, but I couldn't look away. I forced a smile, my unease growing. The caretaker's gaze was piercing, and I felt exposed, as if all my secrets were laid bare. I tried to appear calm, but my heart was racing. He handed me a key, the brass cold and heavy in my palm. "Room 12, sleep well." His words were simple, but there was an underlying tone that sent a shiver down my spine. The key was old, its surface worn smooth by countless hands. I climbed the creaking stairs, each step groaning in protest. The sound echoed in the silence, amplifying my sense of isolation. The stairs were narrow and steep, and I had to grip the railing to keep my balance. The hallway was narrow, the air thick with the smell of dampness. The walls were lined with old wallpaper, its pattern faded and peeling. The floorboards creaked underfoot, adding to the sense of decay. Portraits lined the walls, their subjects gazing down with vacant eyes that seemed to follow my every move. The faces were stern, almost disapproving, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. A shiver ran down my spine. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and I felt a growing sense of dread. Every sound seemed amplified, every shadow more menacing. The Wayfarer's Rest was most definitely not a place for the faint of heart. It was a place steeped in history and mystery, a refuge for those who dared to seek it out. As I made my way to room 12, I couldn't help but wonder what stories the walls could tell, and what secrets they held. My room was small and sparsely furnished, a single bed pushed against the far wall. The walls were bare, save for a single faded painting that hung crookedly. The floorboards creaked underfoot, each step a reminder of the age and neglect that permeated the place. The ceiling was low, making the room feel even more claustrophobic. A single dim light bulb hung from the center, casting long shadows that danced eerily on the walls. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of dust and decay. It was as if the room had been sealed for years, untouched by fresh air or sunlight. The musty smell clung to everything, seeping into my clothes and hair. I could almost taste the dust on my tongue, a gritty reminder of the room's long-forgotten past. I dropped my backpack on the floor, the thud echoing in the silence. The sound seemed to linger, bouncing off the walls before fading into nothingness. I stood there for a moment, listening to the quiet, my heart beating loudly in my chest. The silence was oppressive, pressing down on me like a physical weight. The window, overlooking the mist-shrouded forest, refused to budge. I pushed and pulled, but it remained stubbornly closed, the glass fogged with condensation. Outside, the trees stood like silent sentinels, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. The mist curled around them, hiding the forest floor from view and adding to the sense of isolation. I tried the lamp on the bedside table. A flicker, then darkness. The bulb sputtered weakly before giving up entirely, plunging the room into shadow. I sighed, feeling a sense of frustration and unease. The darkness seemed to close in around me, the shadows growing longer and more menacing. Sighing, I pulled out my book, seeking solace in its familiar pages. The words were a comfort, a reminder of a world beyond the four walls of this room. But as I read, the letters seemed to blur and shift, my mind unable to focus. The sense of being watched was overwhelming, a prickling sensation at the back of my neck. But the words swam before my eyes, my mind unable to shake the feeling of being watched. I glanced around the room, my eyes darting to the corners where the shadows were deepest. There was nothing there, but the feeling persisted, a constant nagging presence that I couldn't ignore. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind against the window pane sent a jolt of fear through me. The house seemed to be alive, its old bones groaning and shifting in the night. The wind howled outside, rattling the window panes and making the walls shudder. I felt a chill run down my spine, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. I ventured out of my room, seeking the reassuring flicker of the common room fire. The hallway was dark and silent, the only light coming from the faint glow of the fire downstairs. My footsteps echoed in the emptiness, each step a reminder of how alone I was. The walls were lined with portraits, their eyes seeming to follow me as I walked. The hallway was deserted, the portraits staring down at me with renewed intensity. Their faces were stern and unyielding, their eyes cold and lifeless. I could feel their gaze on me, a constant, unblinking presence that made my skin crawl. I quickened my pace, eager to reach the warmth and light of the common room. I could have sworn the eyes in one moved, following me as I walked. It was a trick of the light, I told myself, a figment of my imagination. But the feeling of being watched was stronger than ever, a constant gnawing sensation that I couldn't shake. I hurried down the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. Downstairs, the common room was as I had left it, the fire burning low in the hearth. The flames cast a warm, flickering light, the only source of illumination in the room. The furniture was old and worn, the upholstery faded and threadbare. The room was empty, the silence broken only by the crackling of the fire. The caretaker was nowhere in sight. I had hoped to find some company, someone to talk to, but the room was deserted. The sense of isolation was overwhelming, the silence pressing in on me from all sides. I felt a pang of loneliness, a longing for human connection in this desolate place. I settled into a worn armchair, the silence broken only by the crackling of the flames. The fire was a small comfort, its warmth chasing away the chill that had settled in my bones. I stared into the flames, losing myself in their dance, trying to forget the oppressive atmosphere of the house. But something was off. The sweet, cloying smell from earlier was stronger now, almost overpowering. It was a sickly sweet scent like rotting flowers or decaying fruit. I wrinkled my nose, trying to identify the source, but it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The smell was suffocating, filling my lungs and making my head spin. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, the room spinning around me as the scent grew stronger and more insistent. Sleep, when it finally came, was filled with unsettling dreams. The kind of dreams that leave you feeling more exhausted than before you closed your eyes. I found myself in a labyrinth of shadows, where every turn seemed to lead me deeper into a maze of fear and confusion. I dreamt of shadowy figures with empty eyes and voices that whispered my name from the darkness. Their whispers were like a cold breeze chilling me to the bone. They seemed to know my deepest fears, my darkest secrets, and they reveled in my terror. I woke with a start, my heart pounding against my ribs. It felt as though I had been running for miles, chased by unseen horrors. My body was drenched in sweat, and my mind was a whirlwind of fragmented images and half-remembered sounds. The room was pitch black, the silence broken only by the sound of my own ragged breathing. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears, a constant reminder of the fear that still gripped me. The darkness seemed to press in from all sides, suffocating and oppressive. I lay there for what felt like hours, listening to the symphony of creaks and groans emanating from the bowels of the old house. Each sound was a reminder of the age and history of the Wayfarer's Rest, a place steeped in mystery and perhaps something more sinister. Just when I was about to drift back to sleep, I heard it, a soft whisper just outside my door. It was so faint that I almost convinced myself it was my imagination. But there it was again, a barely audible murmur that sent a shiver down my spine. It was too low to make out the words, but the tone sent chills down my spine. It was a voice filled with malice, a voice that seemed to promise nothing but pain and suffering. My mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. I crept to the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the knob. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to hide under the covers and pretend I had heard nothing. But curiosity, or perhaps a sense of duty, pushed me forward. Taking a deep breath, I threw it open. The hallway stretched out before me, a long corridor of shadows and faint moonlight. My heart pounded in my chest as I stepped out, each footfall echoing in the silence. The hallway was empty, the only light coming from the moon shining through the grimy window at the far end. The pale light cast eerie shadows on the walls, making the old house seem even more haunted. I felt a chill in the air, a coldness that seemed to seep into my very bones. I strained my ears, but the whisper was gone. The silence was almost deafening, a stark contrast to the cacophony of my dreams. I stood there, frozen, waiting for something, anything, to break the stillness. Had I imagined it? Perhaps it was just the wind playing tricks on my nerves. The old house was full of drafts and strange noises after all. But deep down I knew it was more than that. There was something in the air, something that didn't belong. But deep down a cold knot of fear tightened in my stomach. It was a feeling I couldn't shake, a sense of impending doom that clung to me like a shadow. I knew that whatever had whispered my name was still out there, watching, waiting. Something wasn't right at the Wayfarer's Rest. The old inn had always been a place of mystery, but now it felt like a place of danger. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something malevolent was lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. The next morning I found myself drawn to the heavy oak door at the end of the hallway, room 13. It stood slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness beckoning me closer. Curiosity, a dangerous companion, urged me forward. I pushed the door open. The room was empty, the air stale and heavy. Dust motes danced in the single ray of sunlight that pierced through a gap in the heavy curtains. On the bedside table lay a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with frantic scribblings. I reached for it, my fingers brushing against the worn leather. "Don't touch that!" The voice, sharp and laced with fear, made me jump back. I spun around to find myself face to face with a young woman, her eyes wide with panic. She was clutching a shawl tightly around her shoulders, her body trembling. I'm sorry," I stammered, my cheeks burning with shame. "I was just curious." The woman took a step back, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "This place, it isn't safe."